Destination Medicine is a collaborative initiative of regional training hubs. With first-hand lessons learned from those who have gone before, this podcast is designed to assist and inspire anyone interested in pursuing a medical career in rural and regional Australia. Welcome to Destination Medicine. I'm Peter Letts. Dr. Angus Baumann's path to medicine looked more like an irregular heart rate. Stops, starts, highs and lows. But through perseverance and choosing a path he truly loved, things began ticking along nicely. Born in New South Wales and growing up in the Hunter Valley, Angus knew the rural life was for him, to be immersed in community, culture, family and care. And that's exactly what he's found as a cardiologist working at Alice Springs Hospital, from treating patients with conditions unique to the region, to developing cardiology services, grappling with access barriers, and being involved with cases that changed his approach to medicine. He loves it all, and his family couldn't be happier or more supportive. So how did this country kid from New South Wales become a cardiologist based in Australia's Red Centre? Angus explains to Nicole Goodman.
I was born in New South Wales and I grew up in the Hunter Valley, and I grew up in a rural area, which is very different to where I work now, but nevertheless it wasn't a city, and we always, I got to grow up and feel I had that country lifestyle and country community, and that was something I always wanted. I was interested in medicine for some time through my, through study and through university and school, but always with a rural interest. I think I could see myself being a doctor in my local community or interacting in my local community. So that was always something that I was most interested in. I didn't get into medicine straight away. It took some time in terms of the journey to medicine. It was quite a long one for me. I did a undergraduate science degree, and then I got in after a couple of attempts in Adelaide, moved to Adelaide and had a great experience there at Flinders University and had a great time at medical school. And then all through medical school, took the opportunity to go rural whenever I could. So Flinders has a really well-established rural medical school. I did my third year in Gambia. I did fourth-year rotations in the Northern Territory, in Darwin, which was fantastic. And then, I always had one view on going to the country. I guess once I started working as a doctor, you do internship. I did internship at the Royal Adelaide Hospital, which was a great experience. But how to then transition what you're doing and start a rural career, which is, again, what I always wanted to do, was a challenge. I didn't exactly know what that looked like. And I think it's hard sometimes when you're in a city hospital because you can have great mentors and great people around you, but they're working in the city. They don't necessarily have an experience of what you want to do. And I was quite lucky in a way that I found good mentors who supported me and who were open-minded and willing to say, hey, this can be done. I don't know how to do it, but I'm happy to help you do that. That was a really good thing, a really powerful thing for me to have those sort of people. And I kept going through my career. I did medicine. I thought I viewed general medicine, and then I really enjoyed cardiology, and I could see how that would work in a rural setting. And these mentors that perhaps, worked in city settings said, actually, no, there's a great opportunity for people to work rurally as a cardiologist. You can do that. You can marry this up. And they helped me do that. And I had the opportunity to come to Alice Springs, and it sort of just ticked all those boxes for me, which I didn't necessarily anticipate.
What a rich experience. Wow. What about family history? Are you the first to go into medicine?
No, I am. Mum's a sonographer, so Mum's medical and worked in hospitals in our area as a sonographer and practices, but isn't a doctor herself. And Dad's an engineer and runs a building company. So I'm the first person in the family, yes, to go into medicine. And my youngest brother, I've got two younger brothers, the youngest one's also done medicine and he's doing emergency medicine.
Okay, so you were the trailblazer of the family.
In some respects, maybe, yes.
In some respects, yeah. Tell us a little bit more about some of the challenges you had getting into medical school. You said you didn't get in first time, and any advice you have for students who don't get in on their first attempt?
It's tough. I've cast my mind back a little bit now. Okay, it's a long process, so you sort of think, what were all those steps? But I think maybe the key of it is that there were a number of steps and there were a number of attempts, and they didn't all work. I think I was lucky insofar as I was able to sort of say, okay, put that behind me and keep going and look to the next opportunity. And I think that's important. I think it's important to know that there are other opportunities. So I tried first in high school, and I did sit at that time, I'm not sure if it's still the entry exam, the UMAT, and I didn't do as well as I wanted in that. I did pretty well in the HCC, but I didn't do quite well enough to then make up for the UMAT result that wasn't as much as I'd like. I mean, it's so competitive, I think, at that level, and only about a third of the medical schools have undergrad students now. It's not a big number. So that was really hard. Then I did a degree at university, not knowing exactly how that would look. And I changed my degree. My results weren't particularly good in the first couple of years, and I didn't exactly know where I was going. And then, I might have thought, well, do I want to do medicine? I think after 12 months or so, I thought, yeah, actually I do. I need to get the marks. And then I changed my degree to just do things that I enjoyed, actually, because I realized that if I didn't like it, I wasn't going to get the marks. So I did a lot of chemistry thinking I should do chemistry. That's what you should do. And I did not do well. I was not particularly good at it. I did not get good marks. And I switched over to a physiology course, which I loved. And I thought, well, this is where I want to go. And my marks picked up significantly. So that was a real help. And then I just kept trying, did the GAMSAT, did better in that, and then applied that year and didn't get in, but tried again the next year and looked around to which medical schools might suit me and align with me. And Flinders had this rural emphasis even before you got in, so we have rural clinical school and a strong focus on rural practice. And I knew that's where I wanted to go. So it just seemed to align, and I was lucky enough to get in. But I think it was not a straightforward path. It took me, 4 or 5 years, including high school and then the undergraduate degree and then a couple of attempts. Yeah. And I think actually looking back at it too, it gave me opportunities. If I'd got in straight away, there are things that I did that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do. So I got to do travel, I got to do some volunteer work overseas, and things that I really look back on now fondly. In some ways, it was a blessing in disguise.
Absolutely. You've expressed your joy and love for rural medicine, but what is it really that appeals to you about rural medicine compared to city practice?
I think there's a lot of things, compared to city practice, I think is hard because it's not to in any way denigrate city practice, and city practice too is rich. And there are things in city practice that you don't get as much of in the country, but I think rural practice gives you an opportunity to do everything medicine offers. For instance, often in medicine, people say, well, I want academic practice as part of my career. Well, we have that here in Alice Springs, and it's like that in many country areas. We have access to clinical trials and research teams, and there are government programs that we've got involved with that help support trials in rural areas. There's university teaching and medical education, and there are so many rural clinical schools now, so many rural places let you do that. But then I think the most fundamental and rewarding part for me is actually just the day-to-day medicine is I'm based in the community. I'm treating members of my community. I become a member of the community. Some people may look at it differently, but you go to Woolworths and you see 3 or 4 patients every single time. And I love that. And generally people are, lovely. You pick the milk up and you say, hello, how you going? And, people don't give you corridor consults. They don't ask you too much. And if you do, it's generally very nice. I like being a part of the community, and I like being friends with my patients, and that's really rewarding. And it leads to feeling like you are making a difference. I'm sure doctors make a difference in all settings. It's not to say that people don't make a difference in the city. Of course they do, but perhaps it's tangible in the country because you can feel the demand sometimes. You talk to people about how far they travel for care or the barriers to care, and being able to be a part of that and deliver care. Or even sometimes if we can't do things here in Alice Springs, we don't do angiograms, for instance, in cardiology, but I can be a part of facilitating that for patients. And I can call colleagues in the city and say, this person's coming down. How can we make this easy for my patient? So you can be a part of the journey, which is great.
Yeah. What about Alice Springs in particular?
I think Alice Springs is a really unique, exciting place to live. And I had been here as a registrar for 3 months, as a lot of my colleagues had who did their training at Royal Adelaide Hospital. We were all set up and everyone had a great time. I think you only get to scratch the surface. And by moving here, you really get to be immersed in a place that is very different to the rest of Australia. Culturally, it must be one of the most diverse parts of Australia. A lot of people think of the huge First Nations population, which is here, and there's a lot of First Nations medicine, which is really rewarding and interesting and culturally immersive. It is so complex. There are 5 or 6 major language groups, not to mention more than 10 languages. I don't want to put the number on it because I'd be wrong. It's always higher than I think. So there's so much diversity, even within the First Nations community. There are so many people from overseas that come to Alice Springs. It's their first experience of Australia. Every part of Australia is here. There are artists, there are tradies, there are universities. Someone was telling me the other day that, and you really wouldn't expect this, that per capita, there's one of the most, like the highest level of tertiary qualification in Alice Springs compared to the rest of the country, because so many people come here to work, to be professionals, to teach, to work in the hospital. I just find it endlessly interesting from that perspective. And then in terms of where I'm at in life, I've got a young family. I've got 2 daughters who are 5 and 2, and it's a great place to raise them. We spend the weekends going out camping and hiking, often with me carrying them on my back, but still hiking. And we get to go exploring. You know, we go out for a day trip here, and it's not just going to the park. You know, I say to the girls, we're going off on an adventure. And yesterday we had some friends visiting from England. We took them out to the East McDonald Ranges to see if we could get to a waterhole. It was completely cut off by floodwater. It's a raging torrent. We had to go through big puddles. That in itself was great fun. And that was just our Sunday drive. So you never know what you're going to get. And I think that's true probably of most rural places in Australia. Every place is different, but ours is very special.
Yeah. Can you share an experience that you've had that perhaps changed the way that you practice medicine?
Yeah. Look, I think probably the case for me that really stands out is a case of a young woman that I looked after who was in her early to mid-20s, who had severe rheumatic heart disease, which unfortunately is incredibly common in Central Australia. Amongst First Nations people, it has a prevalence of 4% compared to 0.02% in the rest of Australia. And the reasons for that we can talk about, but I think are mostly socioeconomic and the social determinants of health and entrenched legacy of colonisation in many respects. And so you look at this, a young person should not have this condition, but this young lady did have this condition, and it progressed to the point where she required a heart transplant, which of course is going to happen in a larger city over on the East Coast. So she went to one of the East Coast centres and had a heart transplant. She was to our knowledge, first Indigenous person from the Northern Territory this century to have a heart transplant.
Wow.
And the barriers involved were huge. But that whole experience just really opened my eyes to all of the barriers that are in place for patients. A lot of them are unintentional, how the system is not necessarily set up for patients despite our best intentions. And what it's led to is a big change in practice for our department and trying to do things differently and really make sure that when we look after patients, we're really open-minded as to what their circumstances are. A short example of this would be this young woman came into us many times and would leave hospital early when we wanted her to stay a bit longer, but she'd leave hospital a bit early without her medications necessarily, and then come back in 6 weeks or so later or 4 weeks later with heart failure, having not taken her medications. If you just hear that, you think, well, this person is not doing what's asked or isn't engaged or doesn't care, or these are sort of things that immediately spring to mind. But when you spoke to this person, she was always honest. She would always say, I haven't taken them and I don't know why, but I can't stay in hospital as long as you want because I have 2 children at home and I'm the sole carer. My grandfather died in your hospital, and this is someone from a remote community who has a strong spiritual connection to family and felt like perhaps her grandfather's ghost was in the hospital. It was therefore not a safe place for her. She would react to medications and feel nausea and feel as though the medications were making her worse because they were not improving her because she was very unwell. And this is someone that was always honest with us. Despite those issues, we could then say to the transplant centre, here are the circumstances. This is where this person's coming from. This is their context. This is an intelligent, engaged person who cares. But these are the real barriers she's got that we don't maybe understand. And to their credit, they said, right, we're up for it, and supported her with a transplant. And she came back to Central Australia and did very well, never missed a tablet, engaged with us. I remember her saying, I think, that heart was cursing me. I couldn't take the medication because the heart was making me ill. Wow. Which in fact, when you look at it, she's right.
Yeah.
And, she was sick because of her heart. She couldn't take the medication because it wasn't making her better. So it was a really eye-opening experience. I've become very good friends with her family and keep in close touch with them. And it's really taught me and our team a lot about how to be open-minded, listen to our patients, how best to serve our patients, what the barriers are for them, and try to overcome that.
What a valuable experience. So much insight to be gained from that. Wow. Angus, zooming out just a little bit, what do you feel makes practicing medicine in Central Australia a bit more unique?
I think one aspect of it is the opportunity to help build a service and develop services, develop models of care which I don't think exists in the city. And I think exists in Central Australia, definitely, and probably in country Australia broadly in multiple locations. Every country town has their own region, their own set of needs, their own set of challenges. And so then you have to be part of a service that meets those challenges. And in many cases, the service is often not there. So there was a cardiology service here, but it was a little bit different when I came. And so I had the opportunity to make some changes and I was backed by the hospital. And so now we've got a team that includes many visiting medical officers from Adelaide, where we send our patients to. Always the patients were just sent from Alice Springs to Adelaide without necessarily that two-way dialogue. But now we have visits from my colleagues at the Royal Adelaide who come up and do weeks at a time, and colleagues in Melbourne and colleagues in Sydney, which is fantastic. And that gives our patients a really broad set of specialties that they can tap into in a way. Subspecialists come and we can tailor what the patient needs to who the visitor is. We can provide more services. By working in Central Australia and developing that model of care, we've been able to get accreditation for a cardiology advanced trainee. And again, I think that exists for every specialty. There's the opportunity to do those things and get more involved with training and promote rural training pathways. And I think, it's that opportunity to develop a service that you think most helps the community and take feedback from the community on what works well, what doesn't, so you can mold the service to meet the needs of the community. And that's an exciting thing that I didn't necessarily anticipate when I thought about rural practice or thought about coming to Central Australia. And in fact, when I did say I was going to come to Alice Springs, the Director of Medical Services at that time did say to me, a key part of this is to develop services to help develop models of care. And that was a great challenge and has been a really interesting part of my work. Some of the other unique aspects of Central Australia too that have been really rewarding are these sort of unexpected opportunities to become involved in guidelines. So I was invited to be part of the 2025 Australian Coronary Syndrome Guidelines with the Heart Foundation and Cardiac Society as a rural representative. I really enjoyed that. That was a really great opportunity for me to learn from really established people in cardiology. And I don't think I would have had that opportunity had I been in a metropolitan area. So that was a really nice thing for me to be part of and a great opportunity for me to learn and I hope contribute in some way. And there are really nice things in terms of ongoing education. Medical officers by the Northern Territory have a 5-year educational sabbatical in addition to long service leave to develop part of their practice or upskill in some way that will benefit Northern Territory. So I'm really looking forward to the fact that in 3 weeks, my family and I are going to go to Canada for 3 months and upskill in grown-up congenital heart disease with a unit in Calgary. And that'll be a great opportunity not only to upskill, but also for our family to spend some time together and have a bit of an adventure and family time. So that's not something I expected or knew about actually when I came here, but often is something that I think really we should get the word out a little bit more in the Northern Territory because it's a wonderful part of working here. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully this episode and this podcast does exactly that for sure. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about barriers. Central Australia, Northern Territory, Alice Springs, very remote. How has that impacted your family more broadly? And what about the future for where you practice? What are your thoughts on that?
I think this comes up quite a lot and it often raises eyebrows a little bit that you're in Alice Springs and people are surprised about what there would be to do there or how you would get there. And I think it's different for everybody. It wouldn't be for everybody, but I think it is probably for more people than realise it. And for our family, it's been amazing. It's been a great opportunity for our daughters to grow up in nature in a small town in a really interesting, rich, diverse place. And in terms of balancing family, I have family in New South Wales. My wife has family in South Australia, but we're lucky in that there's a flight every day to Sydney. There's a flight every day to Adelaide. We're able to host our family when they want to come and visit, and we can get out when we need to. That's important. It is important for us sometimes to leave Alice for a little bit and, go to the shops or visit friends in the city. And that's great. That's a really good thing. And we can do that. It doesn't feel like we're giving up very much at all, to be honest. Day to day, what do we need? We have wonderful friends here. We've got a great life for our kids. We have great jobs that stimulate us. I'm very lucky that my wife also enjoys it. And I think if, she didn't, that'd be really hard too, and that would be a barrier. But we're lucky that we're both we treated this as an adventure when we moved here, and we've just been pleasantly surprised. You hear the stories all the time of people saying, I went to Alice Springs or I went to Darwin for 3 months, and that was 30 years ago. I'm not sure I'll be here 30 years. But, we said, we'll go to 2 to 3, and we're 5 years in now, and we have no plans before our children get to high school, in another 5-7 years at least. So I think by taking that plunge, which can feel difficult actually, and even though I talked earlier about the fact that I wanted to do rural medicine all the way through, and the time came for me to move here, it still felt like a leap, and it still felt like jumping off a cliff a little bit. And I had mentors that actually said, you can do this. This is good for you. Go for it. And I needed a little bit of a push. But when we got here, it's just been fantastic. And all of those perceived barriers and challenges have melted away a little bit and not been as big as we worried they might be.
And so for anyone wanting to live and work in health in the Alice, what would be your advice?
I think I would say go for it. If you want to do it, then you can do it. And I think, as I've sort of just alluded to, there will be a part of you, and there was a part of me that said, is this the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Is this going to work? I look at it, if it hadn't worked, we can go back. And I've got a lot of friends who have worked here who have come to Alice Springs for 1 to 2 years, had a wonderful time, and then gone back to work in the city because that's what was right for their family, and they speak fondly about it. So it doesn't have to look like it does for me. It doesn't have to look like you're here for 5 years or 10 years. It might be you're here for a year or two. That'd be great. Fantastic. And there's great opportunity and experience to be had. So I'd say go for it. If you want to do it, you can do it. You don't have much to lose. It's all upside as far as I'm concerned.
Dr. Angus Baumann, cardiologist at Alice Springs Hospital. This is Destination Medicine. Thanks for listening. Regional training hubs are supported by funding from the Australian Government under the Rural Health Multidisciplinary Training Program.